Well, joining me now is expert on NATO and teaching fellow in political science and international security at the University of Strathclyde, Dr Gavin Hall. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme today. Zelensky there saying there are no signs, really, that Russia is in any way preparing for peace here.
Yeah, so, well, good morning, good afternoon, even. In a way, that's not really that surprising because part of what's likely to be President Putin is going to be representing to President Trump is trying to sell the idea of Russia's position of strength, that it's going to be winning this conflict, and it's really the fighting is just dragging it out, causing more harm and suffering to the civilians in the area. So there's no real need to continue fighting. We're going to achieve our objectives. It's just a matter of time. That's the line that sort of President Putin's very likely to take when he meets Trump on Friday. So it's not really that surprising that Russia is still building up troops, carrying out offensive action. But of course, Zelensky is right. That's hardly a overwhelming symbol or symbolic gesture of a country that's looking to move towards peace.
Yeah, there are real fears, aren't there, that Donald Trump will just meet alone with Vladimir Putin. They'll come up with some kind of a plan, involves Ukraine handing over lads, something that is inevitably, as we heard in Brian Quinn's report, unacceptable for Ukraine.
Yes, then that is a very severe sticking point. But what you always find in peace negotiations, or any negotiations really, is you have two effective phases. Firstly, you have discussions of matters of principle, and then you have the finer details. So whether Ukraine will or won't cede land, that's a matter of principle. If you can get beyond that, then you can start to talk about the detail, right? What's being given up, who's giving up, returning what, and the terms and conditions associated with it. There was a report over here this morning in one of the newspapers that apparently President Zelensky has now accepted that some of the Ukraine will cede some territory, which, if that's true, that's a fairly seismic shift and will then enable the sort of what actual land would Ukraine give up, that phase of the talks being moved on to.
Yeah, it's interesting if that is the case, because obviously Volodymyr Zelensky said in the past it's not even up to him. He would be going against the constitution, which as a president he can't do.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's constitutions can be amended. The United States is obviously very familiar with a vast number of amendments and elsewhere, so it's not unheard of. But obviously, they're trying to limit the scope for what the negotiations are going to take place. And I think it's worthwhile remembering that the onus here is really on President Trump to actually deliver something. You might remember during his campaign, he was saying, I'll solve this on day one, and then it'll be solved within the first 100 days. He's kind of marketing himself and putting him out there as this great deal maker. Well, here's the opportunity for something to actually happen. So in many ways, the person that's got most to lose from Friday is actually President Trump, because if he doesn't get a deal, well, what does that say about his whole mantra of the way he's conducting himself in office and his presidency? So there's significant challenges ahead.
And going along with the line that he does get a deal, the next worry, I suppose, is that Donald Trump will then just blame Volodymyr Zelensky because Volodymyr Zelensky can't agree to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately it. The European Union statement earlier on today is essentially accurate and correct. Ukraine is a sovereign country. It has a right to decide its own destiny and should be involved in these talks, unless we're going back to a sort of pre-First World War era where the great powers decide the affairs of smaller nations and just divide them up as they see fit. But really, if Ukraine is unhappy with the deal, or what can it actually do? It can choose to reject it, in which case the United States probably then withdraws any form of support to an even lower level, denies the ability of use of GPS and various weapon systems to be used, which severely then hampers Ukraine's ability to carry on fighting. So Ukraine doesn't really have too much room for maneuver. What it can do, though, is try and influence and set the tone for how President Trump approaches meeting with President Putin and what he's asking for and trying to set the the parameters of the negotiations. And this is where people like President Macron in France, President Tusk, Keir Starmer, etc., have the ability to try and influence the talks before they actually get underway.
And just finally, I mean, why do you think the European leaders have come up with this today? Is it simply because otherwise they're going to be completely left out in the cold?
Yeah, the European Union and the individual countries themselves have consistently tried to seek a role within Ukraine, because obviously it has severe ramifications for European security more broadly. So they think Europe should have a role, and they're trying to push and get themselves into a position whereby they can have some kind of role and not just be sort of watching or cheerleading from the sidelines.
Good to talk to you on the programme today. Thanks very much, Dr Gavin Hall, who's expert on NATO there and teaching fellow of political science and international security at the University of Strathclyde. Thanks once again.
Thank you.